We're gonna get started here now.
All right, you'll have to excuse me, my voice is a little shot tonight. First order of business, we're gonna stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Greetings. In the name of the state of Maine, you are hereby required to notify and warn the inhabitants of the town of Durham and said Maine state, qualified by law to vote in town affairs, to assemble at the Durham Eureka's Community Center, 606 Hollowell Road, Durham, Maine, on Tuesday, November 19th, 2024 at 6:45 p.m. Then and there to act upon Articles 1 through 4 as set out to wit. All right, Article 1 reads, to choose a moderator to preside at said meeting. Do I have any nominations?
Nominate Bill Schneider.
Do I have a second? All right, it has been motioned and seconded. Are there any other nominations?
Please.
Seeing none, I will now accept the 3 written nominations to be filled out and turned in to my box over here, please. Huh? Write it there for me, thank you. Are all of them?
Yeah, that was all of them.
Okay. Bill Schneider. Bill Schneider and Bill Schneider. All right.
I like that.
The only unanimous vote in town is Bill Schneider.
Can I have you read?
Yes.
2 paragraphs aloud.
Yep.
Right hand.
I, Bill Schneider, do swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state, so long as I should continue a citizen thereof. I, Bill Schneider, do swear that I will faithfully discharge, to the best of my abilities, the duties incumbent on me as moderator of this meeting, according to the Constitution and the laws of the state.
All right. I just have you sign right there on that line for me. Yep. I now hand the meeting over to Bill Schneider. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for electing me and choosing me to be your moderator. I'll try to do a decent job tonight. First order of business is to adopt the Maine Moderator's Manual as a guide. And I would ask for unanimous consent to adopt the Maine Moderator's Manual as a guide for the procedure of this meeting. If anybody objects, please say it right now. I hear none, so we have adopted the Maine Moderator's Manual, say that 3 times fast, as a guide for this meeting. The next thing to do is to decide whether non-voters should be able to speak at the meeting, and we have to do it by name. So I'm aware of 3 non-voters who may wish to speak at the meeting, and they are George DeBarge, the town planner, Robert Tripp, the fire chief, and Jerry Douglas, the town manager. We can also do this by unanimous consent. So anybody who objects to any one of those 3 folks being able to speak at this meeting, please say so now. I hear none, so we're gonna let those people speak if we have a need to hear from them. Is there anybody else who's a non-voter who would like to speak at the meeting? Is there anybody else here who's a non-voter in Durham? Okay, great, because we're usually required to separate the voters from the non-voters at town meetings, so we don't have to do that. There are some pretty simple rules for debate. Only one person can speak at a time. And I'd like to have, if you'd like to speak, raise your hand, I'll recognize you. I'd like to have only one person speaking at a time. If you could speak to me, that would be great. You could speak to me, you could ask questions of me. I won't give you answers, but I'll try to find somebody who has answers to give you. Please introduce yourself when you stand up to speak. And please keep your remarks brief and to the issue that's on the article that we're discussing, and that'll be great. Please remember, we're all neighbors here. We're all here because we love Durham and we want to have the best present and future for Durham, and keep everybody's good intentions in mind, and try to be polite and happy, and we'll get this done. So, if you're looking at your schedule, Article 3 was a typo. So we're just gonna move past that, and that will fail because nobody made that motion. We'll move on to Article 4, which is shall an ordinance entitled Moratorium Ordinance Battery Energy Storage Systems be enacted? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we enact an ordinance entitled Moratorium Ordinance Battery Energy Storage Systems. Would anybody like to discuss this? Yes, sir, or ma'am? I can't.
Ma'am.
Yes, please. I'm sorry I couldn't see you.
I've lived in this town over 50 years. I'm an outsider. But I've been here over 50 years. Where are you getting that information from?
Can anybody answer that question? Go ahead.
Which information are you referring to?
Well, you say Article 3 and Article 4.
We don't have that.
We don't have anything like that.
Yeah.
Oh,
If you're gonna read it, we should be able to see it.
it's just the schedule for the meeting.
Yeah, that's just the schedule for the meeting. Article 4 is the ordinance that was handed out at the entrance of the door. No, I didn't get it.
No, I mean, we ran out of your vote. We need copies? I have.
Yeah.
We don't have copies. No. We have that. This is what Article 4 is talking about.
Yeah, Article
You
4
said
is the
Article 3
ordinance,
and
yeah.
4, they didn't mean anything to me.
Don't worry, Article 3 was just a typo on the schedule.
Thank you.
Sure. Is there anybody else who'd like to discuss this?
Can we just read the article so everybody's got it? As it comes up?
Yeah, sure, it's very long. It's like 5 pages long.
The next article is?
This article that we're discussing right now is 5 pages long. The meat of it is, the ordinance is. The article says, shall an ordinance entitled Moratorium Ordinance, Battery Energy Storage Systems be enacted? And the ordinance was passed out, and it's about 5 pages long. If you'd like me to read it, I will do it. Would anybody like me to read this?
Just need to know what the article is about.
Yeah, it's about a moratorium on battery energy storage systems.
About New York having a bad time over there.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Article 5 goes here.
Yes,
Todd Bollier, Stackpole Road. Is anybody here to tell me why we need a battery energy storage system in Maine? Have we ever had one?
good question.
The discussion tonight is about the ordinance and not about, the battery storage facilities across the state. And so it would be best for us to keep the discussion on the proposed ordinance.
Well, that's a legitimate question. Are there any battery storage?
Oh, so,
facilities in
I
Maine?
mean, yeah, there are battery storage facilities in the state of Maine.
Where?
I know that there's one in Gorham, but I don't have an inventory of all the battery storage facilities statewide. I know that there's one proposed to go through in, Lincoln, but I'm not aware of every battery storage facility statewide.
Yes,
Catherine Kearns, can we just back up a second? 'Cause
of course.
those of us that came in like 6:30, we had this.
That looks like what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So this tells us all the different things.
This is the ordinance.
That's the proposed ordinance.
Okay, so that's what, that's why
Yeah,
we're
and the
getting.
That's why
proposed
we're here.
ordinance-
That's why we're getting confused though.
Yeah, the
Because
proposed,
it says Durham has two major streets, that's three, that's a typo?
No.
No.
so the proposed ordinance, the Article 4 is to enact a moratorium, and this is the details of the moratorium, this would be the ordinance. There are several points in here, it's numbered, but this is all voted on as one,
Okay,
ordinance.
so that's why I'm confused,
Yes.
because apparently I don't have the other piece.
I'm so sorry, I think I confused everybody. So let me go back and explain a little bit.
So just tell us what this is, and tell us what this is.
Yes,
And then tell us what we're voting on.
exactly right.
Thank you.
I have the official schedule for this meeting, and this is what it looks like. I don't know if they passed it out or not. It's got the greetings that was read out at the beginning of the meeting. And then Article 1 says to choose a moderator to preside at the meeting. And so we went through and we did that, and a couple of selectmen cast ballots so that I would be chosen as moderator. Article 2 on here says to adopt the main moderator's manual as a guide for the meeting. And we did that, if you remember. Article 3 on the schedule is just a typo. So we skipped over that. And, cause it really has no meaning, and we don't have to take it up. Article 4 is why we're here tonight. We're here to discuss and to vote on shall an ordinance entitled Moratorium Ordinance Battery Energy Storage Systems be enacted. This piece of paper that you probably picked up at the door is that ordinance. This is the, kind of like a town law that we'll be voting to adopt or not to adopt tonight. And it's about 5 pages long, it's a legal document, it will be, published in the town ordinances. This, I don't know what it is or who it's from, but it's, some kind of information sheet. Yes,
Yeah, this was the information sheet that was handed out during the, public information session last week to explain what battery energy storage systems are and the whole concept of the, moratorium and the reasons why. I believe this has also been available on the website, for people to review ahead of time, but we can discuss this if people need that frame of context for tonight, so if folks want that, we can.
did you wanna add something?
I was going to ask a question for someone that's capable of answering what the reason is, because I think it will help people who are here that haven't been following this conversation, that a moratorium, that we're here to either to vote to enact or not a moratorium in Durham at this time.
So why are we here? Can somebody answer that? Sure, go ahead.
The purpose of this moratorium.
So we can see them.
Stand up? Sure. I'm not much taller when I stand up, but I will. Yeah, the purpose of the moratorium is just to put a temporary hold on any sort of battery energy storage facilities that could be proposed in town. The town currently has zero, framework for how to accept any applications or any standards by which we would apply any sort of permit. And so, if we don't have something like this and a proposal were to come in, we wouldn't be well prepared to, handle that in a meaningful way. And so this is designed just to give us 6 months to explore what options exist for us to create an ordinance or create standards, much like what we did with the solar, ordinance last year, just to make sure that we can get a public input process and have the best interest of the town in mind. So that would just be what we would be voting on tonight, is to put a 6-month hold on any applications that would be accepted, and that gives us time to work through the public process to create an ordinance that aligns with the town folks' goals and objectives. Without that, if someone were to make a proposal, it would go through right now, and the only lever we might have to evaluate the proposal would be site law, and site law has, doesn't have the mechanisms necessary to make sure certain safety standards are met. Site law is more designed for like shopping malls and things of that nature.
Yes,
Catherine Curtis again. So basically, page 3 is what we're voting on. Everybody has this.
Well, this whole thing is the moratorium
This
ordinance.
tells us, I think it's the last two paragraphs kind of summarize.
It's a summary.
Yes, it's a summary. Yep.
And this is just for 6 months while we decide what we wanna do about this. It's not voting it in or out.
I can, correct, it's just a 6-month, moratorium, and if after 6 months there is not a, clear path forward, the select board can, prolong the moratorium for another 6 months, for a year total period from the day that this is enacted, and that just gives us time to work on things.
This is similar to when other towns put in moratoriums for all kinds of things, when their ordinance doesn't have, like a marijuana shop, is an
Correct.
example. We don't have an ordinance for that, and so that, this is just kind of put a pause on while we do some more work.
Yeah, correct. The goal here is not to judge the merit of any proposal or any potential for proposal, just to acknowledge that we don't have any sort of mechanism and we need to establish something, before the next town meeting. So we need to have some, just a temporary, moratorium. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Bill Long, Millbrook Road. Now, I do have a solar system. If I read this correctly, this would not prevent me from putting a battery in my garage to save some solar for when we lose power or whatever.
Can somebody answer that? Yeah.
Yep, that's correct. If you look at the end of this here, it talks about, the moratorium shall not apply to a battery energy solar system, a storage system that is designed and intended only to store energy produced by a permanent solar energy system. So if you have rooftop solar and you use a battery storage to help store your electricity, this would not apply to you. If you are already, have that in, you're good. If you are looking to add that, we don't anticipate that this would apply to you over the next 6 months.
Any other questions? Yes.
Derek Lovett, Snow Road, on the same topic, on the public information session, some concerns are raised about the 20 kilowatt hour maximum, considering that is less than what some homes require. Has that been addressed in any way?
Answer that.
Go ahead.
Yep, so with it not applying to energy that's being stored by solar production, that would mean that it doesn't apply to that. So if someone has 30 kilowatt hours of battery storage associated with their at-home energy production, this would not apply.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We made sure to clear up that ahead of tonight's meeting based off of the public comment we received.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
Mike Blake, Stackpole Road, Durham. I really don't like these types of meetings because the special town meetings, you never really get a full scope of people. But we're here, so we'll have to discuss that. It would seem to me that when you have these types of things, that you was a little better prepared and maybe had some information up here other than what I know you said you put on the website and stuff, but not everybody gets that stuff. So here we are, last minute, and we got one question we're gonna vote on, and I'm not really sure everybody understands fully why we're voting on up or down. So, are we just trying to kick this down the road to stop something that may or may not be good? That's what I'd like to know. I mean, this town doesn't have any industry to help pay for the tax base, just have homes. So, if you have something coming into town that might help with the tax base, and I'm not voting for or against it at this point, but we should look at that and we should have a lot more information out there, not just what you put on the website for a few people to get at. I mean, to me, we shouldn't really be voting on this moratorium tonight without having a whole lot more information. And obviously, from the start of this, it wasn't very well prepared. Special town meetings are probably the worst that any town could have, because you got 50 people here, maybe 60. Usually at the town meetings, we have 175, 200, 150. It's a lot fairer, a lot better.
Yeah.
We ended up with special town meetings before, when we did our managers and stuff, and you see what happened there. We shouldn't be doing this.
I don't think that last comment is necessary, but I would like to address the previous comments. We had a public information session last week that everyone was invited to, where we highlighted everything both here and in this handout here that was made publicly available for people to come to in person. All of that information was put online. It was also recorded, so even if someone wasn't going to do something online, they could still get all the information via paper or in person. We also understand that special town meetings are less than ideal for anything due to the busy nature that everyone has. But the reason we reserved using the special town meeting for this instance is because we feel like this is a issue that should not be held off on until the next town meeting of April. If we don't do this consideration now, anything that could come to fruition or any proposal that might come forward between now and the next town meeting, we would not be able to process in a way that would keep the town's interest best in mind. Some of the things that were brought up by the previous speaker were things like tax revenue and the impact on town. That's the exact reason why we wanna have this moratorium, because if we have a 6-month period, we can actually go through and evaluate that and figure out the best way to consider or not consider any sort of project and take into consideration any economic development that might come out of that. And so without putting a moratorium, we can't leverage those sorts of tools, and we're just at the mercy of whomever may or may not decide to apply. So, I'm hoping that answers the question.
I'd like to address that comment also. When the select board and the planning board, and some of our various conservation commission, when they're prioritizing work, battery storage systems has been on the scope of work for over 2 years now. And because the planning board is a volunteer board that also reviews subdivision applications, any conditional use permit, you know, they've been working on the solar, there's only so much that they can get done in a year. So when they're prioritizing, last year the priority was resource protection and solar. And the battery storage system didn't hit up top, which would have allowed more time. Now the pressure is on because we do have an interested party that is interested in potentially doing this in Durham. And we have a new town attorney who is very involved, and it comes from her recommendation that we put this moratorium in place because of all the reasons that Joe spoke about. We don't have a mechanism or a vehicle right now to leverage anything that might suggest economic development attached to it, and also because if we can't apply any standards other than site plan review. And so we're asking the town, we're putting that out for vote for those reasons. We need time to look at what the best way forward for Durham is, rather than always being reactive to situations, which in my opinion, Durham has been reacting to what gets put in front of them rather than being proactive. And if we wanna have a vision for where the town is going, we can't always be reacting, we have to be proactive. And putting a 6-month pause on this with that interested party, it gives us time to be proactive and involve the community in what that looks like versus having something like this not have to go through any kind of review other than site plan review, and then everybody being really upset about that because we didn't have any parameters around it. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, go ahead.
My big worry with it is fire prevention. Could we get our excellent fire chief to give his opinion on how you could put out a lithium battery fire?
If he's willing, I'd love to hear from him.
Thanks, Todd.
Open pray.
If I may approach.
Please.
Rob Tripp, your fire chief. Is it easier if I go up front? It really bothers me to see you back. Is that okay?
That's perfectly
Permission
fine.
to,
We need you on camera.
no, we don't.
He's got 3 lenses.
Todd brought up a good question of how your fire department or any fire department would put out a lithium ion battery fire. I have not met with people, I have not done the standard, but I have been doing the training. Your fire department, volunteer, limited water supply, there's 23 dry hydrants in town, a couple of them are inactive. We've had a drought, so we're still relying on that. The best way is A or B. You can let it burn and protect exposures around it, or you can put copious amounts of water on it. The moratorium or this vote, I, as the fire department representative, we don't have teeth. So if it wasn't just a residential development, there's no enforcement or regulatory that I could put on them, meaning a dry hydrant, more training, a bigger upper tanker. There's nothing that I can do but what you have in place. So, very difficult if that were to come to town without some type of plan. So it's either let it burn or copious amounts of water, which is still very difficult. That would be that type of gallonage, 8,000, 10,000 gallons or more, and that's what they're saying for a Tesla car. I just had this training. So if a Tesla car, and I only use that brand because of the training, were to catch fire, you could use up to 8,000 or 10,000 gallons to put that car out. We carry 4,000 in those trucks on the road, so we're a little shy. So that would be calling in mutual aid, which I love, but mutual aid, partners, other towns, or have a tanker shuttle. So having some time to come up with a plan, to train your firefighters, to figure out a water supply, or to regulate something that they would have to provide on site would certainly help me. But we only have two choices as a town, let it burn, and that's a policy, that's okay. You can let something burn in place and protect exposures, or copious. So you bring up environmental hazmat and whatnot, that's above my purview, but not lost on me as a concern. Does that answer the fire side questions? Todd, does that answer your question?
Do you have a question for the fire chief, or?
Yes.
Please, yeah.
Patty Smith, Rangdale. Question about toxic gases released during this fire, let it burn.
Good question.
I can,
It depends on how they are laid out. So if it's a car, natural ventilation, heat, smoke rises, you let it go. Other battery storage that I've been reading up on, they can either come in pods, they can come in buildings, it could be something like a shipping container. They would have to be explosion proof, there's other ramifications. As far as the smoke, there's not much once they catch fire, there's not much we can do. They do provide costly blankets, like a fire blanket that you could put on it. It's sort of a one-time use. Those are anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000, sort of a one-time use, and only as big as a car. Now, I'm not suggesting the town pay for that, but if something were to come to town, you could have a policy that says you shall provide some type of fire protection or a special nozzle, or they may have an insurance plan. As far as the toxic gases, you're right, they do emit toxic gases. There's not much that I can do. We can spray hose lines and play with the wind and away from houses or the population. But again, that's a geographical plan that would need to be enacted prior to construction, and I don't have that purview as of yet.
Is there something you want to?
yeah, I was gonna say, these are all really good questions, and as to Chief's point, you know, not all answers are known, and that is why we're proposing a moratorium, because to Chief's point, if the plan is determined to be you let something burn, then we would say as a town, we could potentially say, well, we have concerns about where any project could be located due to proximity to developments. If there's questions about the need for defendable space around a structure, right now, we could not leverage any sort of ordinance to require X amount of feet of non-burnable space. If we enact this moratorium, we then could go along the route of developing requirements for that. So these are really good questions, but without having a moratorium, we can't ask these of an applicant should an applicant come forward, unless we have a ordinance to use in our back pocket. So that's why we're trying to bring up this ordinance for the town to consider.
Sir, did you want to speak?
I'll skip on that because I think the chief covered it.
Great, great. Other, yes, yes, ma'am.
Come back here and do.
Jane Rice, Bowie Hill. Am I correct in understanding that this moratorium will only hold things off for 6 months, potentially a year if it goes to that point where the select board has to extend it, but it doesn't put anything in perpetuity in place that we can get angry at later saying, damn, that got voted on by 50 people and that makes me
That's a very good point. So the moratorium would only put a restriction for 6 months with an option of extending it another 6 months. The intent is if the community here tonight is to enact a moratorium, the select board would direct the planning board to explore all options available for permitting, regulations, and consideration of these projects with the intent of them bringing a proposal through the public participation process and to the April 2025 town meeting for a town-wide vote. And so as for the time thing, we've already checked in with the planning board chair, and they understand that this is a very important task, and that if that involves extra meetings and extra work, it's something that they're gonna have to undertake. And if they can't make that happen for the April 2025 town meeting, and we decide to add another 6 months, we would then be having to do a special town meeting 1 year from now, but we would have a very long lead time to let people know we weren't able to get there for April, but the plan is to be there for July or August, so we can make sure that it's very well participated. And that's part of the concern here, is that without a special town meeting, without a moratorium, the participation of the public in any sort of project is virtually zero. Participation with the boards is virtually zero. The planning board wouldn't even have the opportunity to evaluate projects the way we would expect them to, taking concerns from the fire chief. They couldn't even ask for that sort of impact, so that's what the goal is here. So.
Are there other questions or comments? Yes.
In, Don Church or Budget Road, can you turn around and make a proposal that, can you find out first if the town doesn't, if they do not want this, then we're paying a board to write up this great big long proposal, where can you make a proposal that just says, sorry, no, we don't want this in our town? I mean, to me, it's wasting
Yeah,
a
if you
lot of
vote
time.
down tonight's proposal, then there would just be no action, and none of the boards would invest any time into developing an ordinance. So that is an option.
But then anybody can come in and do anything and we can't stop them, is that what you're saying?
Correct. That's what we're voting on tonight.
So we should have at town meeting have voted to say, no, we don't want any at all, no matter what. And then you're gonna make the ordinance to say, sorry, we do not want this in our town?
Go ahead.
I don't believe we have the legal capability to put a ordinance in perpetuity. We would have to check with our town legal counsel on that. But generally, you can only put a moratorium for 6 months to a year.
Yeah, I
And
guess
so
I'm not saying
during this next
moratorium.
6 month period, if the community decides that they wanna come forward and make a suggestion to the planning board to have a very strict ordinance that doesn't allow it or something like that, that is allowable. But from the floor tonight, we can't enact a moratorium in perpetuity for this.
Yeah, no, I think you're saying that,
If my understanding
At
of the
some
question
point,
is
yeah.
can we ban these forever, always, without using any sort of public input from the town boards or committees?
well,
Is that the
Yeah.
question?
the question is, can it be banned forever at some point? I think, is that right?
Well, it seems though we're putting the cart in front of the horse here instead of finding out, voting on, does the town want it? Absolutely no, if that's what happens. If they do, then okay, you gotta write up an ordinance and make it very strict to cover all aspects of it.
So
But if everybody really doesn't want it, it's overwhelmingly no, then
that
I
would
think
come
we're
out
wasting
during
our
the
time.
public participation process if a moratorium is enacted tonight.
Well, and somebody could write up an article for the town warrant at a town meeting that forbids it, that makes it impossible for this kind of project to happen. And then the town would have a chance to vote on it.
I'm not sure if we can forbid it forever, can we?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, so that could happen, but if we don't have a moratorium now, that would just expose us until April without an ordinance.
Yes, go ahead.
Actually, sorry, George, can you answer the question about the banning in perpetuity?
George Scarsdale, planner, and any ordinance, is a legislative act of the town meeting. And so if you were to enact a prohibition on battery energy storage systems, which you can legally do, that would not bind a future vote of another town meeting. So you cannot ban something forever.
it takes a legislative act to permit it or to prohibit it, and that would require a town meeting vote, and a subsequent town meeting vote could reverse that, as with any other ordinance.
Mr. Bollier?
Thank you. Could we say in the ordinance that the battery storage area has to have its own fire department, has to take care of its own fire?
We can't change the wording of this
Yeah.
ordinance here
No,
tonight.
I know, but in the future.
Yeah, in the future, you could
Point
absolutely.
of order, we're getting into what a potential ordinance could look like, and I think the discussion's.
I think that's
important.
entirely germane, so I'm gonna allow that kind of
Okay.
discussion. Yes, sir.
Yes, Jim Worthington. It seems to me that if I come in tomorrow with an application to put this thing down over there, you can't stop me. This is a moratorium to prevent that from happening until the planning board can make up a list of do's and don'ts and cans and can'ts. In the meanwhile, to hold that off for at least 6 months until they can do their work, and that's all this is.
Yeah, that's a correct assessment.
I think we're all in agreement.
Well, let's see if anybody else wants to make a comment or ask a question. Yes, go ahead.
Jim Sanborn, Run Around Pond Road. Why is it retroactive to September 4th?
Can somebody answer that?
Yeah, I can answer that. When you enact a moratorium, it's retroactive for a certain amount of days, to provide you with coverage in case someone did apply. So we do not have an application, but if someone were to have applied, you can enact a moratorium and say, including everything up to 45 days previously. So that's just how standard moratorium language works. We're not in that situation, but that's just how the language works.
Good question. Any other questions or comments? Yes?
Hi, I'm Jenny, I live on 1.5. I was a little late, so you may have already covered this. Why would we want a battery storage system? Has that been talked about, like what the pros are? Because it seems kind of obvious that nobody wants it and I mean.
Would anybody like to answer why somebody might want a battery storage facility?
Tax base?
No, one second, put someone's with their-
I don't even know what it is, honestly, but.
Are you answering the question?
I can answer.
Sure.
I'm actually part of the team that's building the one in Gorham.
Building it where?
In Gorham.
Okay.
You got a 137 megawatt battery storage facility going up there. And
Are you a voter in town?
yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make
I
sure.
live on 1031.
Okay,
Say your
great.
name and
Maybe
address.
Cody, introduce yourself.
Name and address.
Cody Mayhew, 1031 Hollowell.
Great.
Yeah, so it stabilizes the grid, which is used, all the renewable energy coming in from all the solar farms all around. It provides an area to hold that storage, and at night, release the storage back when the sun's not shining, so you're not having any energy. It's gonna also bring in attention to the grid around here and result in less outages. I mean, that's the gist of it.
Mr. Schneider.
Yes.
And the other thing too is any sort of development that goes into town, its valuation is added to the tax base. These projects can be valued into the hundreds of millions of dollars, which would have significant impact, could have significant impact on the Durham tax base. You figure the way we calculate taxes now is you take valuation and then you divide the budget by that valuation. If all of a sudden that valuation goes up by several $100 million with one person, one entity's development, that could significantly reduce taxes. So that is an issue, it is a consideration that some may take into thought when thinking about facilities like this.
But it couldn't reduce property taxes. I mean,
No, it
there's
would,
something
it could, yes.
How?
Because when you calculate property tax, you calculate the value of all the property in town. You take the budget and then you divide it by that, and that's how you get your mill rate, so how much you pay per $1,000 of valuation. If $200 or $300 million more dollars of valuation is added to the town, you're now dividing the same budget by another $200 or $300 million, lowering the mill rate potentially 30, 40, 50% depending on the scope of the project, which would decrease your personal tax, property tax
I'm sorry,
liability.
did you already say where it was going to happen?
There's no proposed project right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I just wanna add in one more thing, actually like two more. So one, they come with fire suppression built into all those modules. So every single one of those has its own sort of fire suppression that can put out its own fire if something were to happen. Now, if it was to get really bad, then yeah, you're gonna call in the fire department, and of course, the devastation can happen. I forgot the part two.
Well, I mean, I can add to that, Jason Queen, Lee Road, Durham, Maine, also part of the Gorham project. I mean, these things are constantly being monitored, so that any sort of thermal runway issues that arise, they shut themselves down. Hopefully ahead of time of needing any sort of fire department interaction. As well as having like an Ansel type system built into the containers, depending on which style of they're putting in. Agreed, if something were to happen, and it has happened in New York, you know, and in other places, it can be problematic, but there's several gigawatts of this happening throughout the country right now, moving west to east. And, Gorham is the biggest right now, with the one that they're proposing in Lincoln is sort of to be the biggest in the world. So, I mean, it is coming. And it does protect the grid from buffering. We have a failing grid system. EV chargers are coming. We're not built, we're not prepared for it, and this is a way to combat that without running giant transmission lines from Canada into here.
Any other, yes, sir.
Alan Purington, Day Road, call the question.
Well, let me see if anybody else wants to speak first.
Mr. Moderator, if I may.
Yes, please.
Brian Lanois of the Rabbit Road. I'm a member of the planning board and I fully support this moratorium. As a member of the planning board, I cannot effectively do my job and make the best decisions for the town without this moratorium. We need time to research this. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to make a comment, ask a question? Yes, go ahead.
Just one quick comment. Originally, I was against the moratorium, but after going to the meeting last week and discussing it, I'm actually for it, despite being a potential contractor that could build this. Because at the end of the day, for Durham, all we have is New England ISO and PUC restrictions, maybe Maine DEP. Other than that, we really have no say as a town as to what's gonna be going down, and we deserve say.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. The question, shall an ordinance entitled Moratorium Ordinance, Battery Energy Storage Systems be enacted? So if you vote yes, you want to impose this moratorium. If you vote no, you do not want the moratorium. So everybody who wants to vote yes to enact this moratorium, please raise your card. Okay, put them down. Everyone who wants to vote no to not enact the moratorium, please raise your card. Thank you. By an overwhelming majority, the article is passed, and so the moratorium will be enacted. Wait, we have to have the motion that never fails.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. Everybody who's in favor of adjourning, please raise your blue card. Thank you. Everybody who's opposed can stay here to clean up.